Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm your host, Ade Darame. And across the table from me, friend and colleague, Mohamed Mboj. Mr. Mboj, welcome to the program.
Yes, glad to be here.
Glad you're here. And I have to say a very, very warm welcome to our viewers, because guess what? From this week on, we're back to 10 stories. Remember, we went to 5, we slimmed down for Ramadan, and then last week, we still only did 5. But this week, it's the full menu, okay? 10 stories. And so you're probably wondering what's on the menu then? Well, I won't tell you everything on the menu. We'll keep some as a surprise, but we have the president giving the State of the Nation address. We also have the president launching a new ferry across Banjul Bara. We also have the First Lady. She's been abroad to the White House to give a speech. And also the vice president, he's been to Cameroon. There's a World Trade Organization meeting currently taking place in Cameroon, and he was there. Also, as you would imagine, the trade minister was there. We'll also hear from him and some of the things he had to say. Also, people always say, Ecowas, what do they do? Well, we'll give you a surprise about some of the stuff that they've done here in the Gambia. Also, another story, and the UN has declared the enslavement of Africans to be the gravest crime against humanity. As you would imagine, some people were not happy about that because they want to have a monopoly on that kind of suffering. So they've raised voices against it. But nonetheless, these are some of the stories. And I guess we get things up and running with the State of the Nation address. The Constitution says the president has to deliver one of these. He kind of gives himself kind of scorecards, and he tells people all the wonderful things he's done. Sometimes he might mention some of the challenges, but he tends to skip over those. Not just this president, most presidents do that. So, what did our president have to say? Have a look, have a listen.
In the short term, the Recovery Focus National Development Plan Year 2023-2027 will continue to drive the consolidation of our gains and acceleration of the ongoing socio-economic transformation process across all development sectors. My government has made decisive reforms and investments across the energy, petroleum, and mining sectors. I am thus pleased to report that we have achieved 90% national energy access and remain on course to attain universal access by the end of 2020.
As I speak to you, 4 new people at the border villages, they are all displaced. Did you hear a mention of that on security? No one mentioned about it in the statement. So, and then now at the moment, this is affecting families, because even the women in their usual garden work, they have to run away. Imagine 2 weeks you do not water your garden. What is going to happen? And we did not hear the president mention about that. So the message what I have said, government should engage Senegal. I said this is a war that started 1982, and it was not solved. 1982 to date is how many years?
Mr. Mboj, I said the president gives himself a kind of marks his own scorecard, tells people all the wonderful things he's done, but not everybody's going to be happy. As we heard from that National Assembly member from Foni there, he's talking about the spillover of the Casamance war, which is erupted again, and he said the president made no mention of that when he mentioned security.
This is always going to be difficult. What do you mention and what
do you
don't
include, what do you leave out?
Exactly, because with this sort of thing, State of the Nation address, we are not really expected to go through the nuts and bolts of all your policy, just perhaps the headline stuff more generally. So, yes, obviously, but you would also expect him to sort of tout, as it were, what, he sees as achievements for his government. And to some extent, yes, justified in doing so. It's just that for the rest of us, we sort of provide more of a context and the like. But criticisms such as we heard from that gentleman there, we're bound to come.
They're bound to come. And one of the things that I looked and listened for, because I was at home, I wasn't at work, was that this gentleman mentioned security, and he mentioned Casamance. I expected the kind of perennial question, why are ECOMOG still here? Or ECOMIG, I beg their pardon, Ecowas was Sierra Leone. But that didn't come up when they mentioned security. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, if they're still here by next year, which, as you know, it's not going to be renewed. So, you know, we would imagine that, but that didn't come up. But nonetheless, he talked about the economy, he talked about, you know, the sort of strategic plans that his government, talked about access to water, electricity, and so on, the things you would expect. But what was your sense generally of the whole, you know, what he said and what, you know, the responses, some of the responses that we got from the floor? Absolutely,
and possibly the reason why we haven't had that many talk, as it were, about ECOMIC and when they will leave. Maybe because they've given us the final 24-month notice.
This is it, yes, and they said it's not going to be renewed beyond that.
It's not going to be renewed beyond that. So really there's no point really wasting time there. So coming to the president with the several high-level statistical achievements he gave us, he certainly presented an image of a Gambia, if not quite a modern industrial Gambia, at least a modern industrializing, as it were, Gambia. GDP growth in 2025, we've seen 5.9%. Inflation down from 17.3 in 2023 to 6.6%, stuff like that. But as Gambia for all, reminded us, these paper statistics really do not reflect.
They don't translate into people's pockets.
As it were, into purchasing power, actual purchasing power. That's just what it is. And falling inflation, well, market prices are not following that downward trend. It doesn't quite work that way, I understand. So this is the key. So things are falling, but only slower.
Yeah,
that's really what it is.
Well, this is it.
Yeah, that's what it means.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, prices will still go up, but not as fast as before.
Well, this is
that's really what it means.
And also, is that likely to change when, you know, we always hear about external shocks, and we have another story later on when our own chairman was kind of, you know, sort of trying to encourage people to kind of get into agriculture and so on. But when we import so much, and then you hear about, you know, oil prices going higher and higher, those will inevitably transfer to us, the customer, either in direct oil prices or just the you know, transportation of the goods from abroad. So that's likely to dent it. Again, you know, as I said, external shocks. They can do all they can, but you know, you have outside forces that compel you to make changes.
We're at the mercy of outside forces, really. I once read a World Bank report where it indicates that most of our inflation is really imported.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So we don't have much room, as it were, much space. There's no latitude, as it were, to move this or move that. Sure. You just better pray that the international weather, as it were, is stable. You don't have any storms and the like. So there we heard him say 90% electricity access, as it were. But when I went looking for independent confirmation of it, the most recent World Bank data we've got on this from 2023, it says 66.9%.
That's right.
So I've not seen any independent verification of the so-called 90%. These are government figures. It's important we understand that.
I think it's important to say that because at the last Meet the People tour, they went around with a kind of notebook, which he told us they were going to go around and they were going to look at the number of communities that have been electrified since the previous one, and of course many of those since those World Bank figures. So who knows? Yes,
that's one aspect. And another thing he said, there was the SOEs. We are concerned because they've been wasting really.
And there's been the debate: should they be privatized?
Should this or that? So there, our president said that the SOEs have moved from 2.6 billion loss in 2024 to 2.5 billion profit last year. Well, what we got from the SOE Commission is that they've reported significant reduction in losses. They said exceeding 1 billion in January 2026.
Right,
But the specific 2.5 billion profit, maybe that needs to be independently audited by the National Assembly. This are also claims. So this is it. With infrastructure, they're touting what 1,200 kilometers of road since 2017.
That's right.
So, saying a lot of things,
Yeah, quite.
as it were. I'm sure in the debate, they're going to have a debate in the National Assembly,
That's
and
right.
everybody will be talking about it,
Yeah.
you know, especially opposition figures already. Usain Utabo, the
Yeah, well,
DDP, has already said, look, this is like a rehash, as it were, isn't it, what happened last year, and that sort of thing. So this is the key. Some of the claims quite interesting. Even the TRRC recommendations, they said they've implemented 60.
Yeah, quite.
Fine, 141 to go, and the $20 million in the reparations fund and that sort of thing.
That's right.
But as of late of 2024, early 2025, according to the National Human Rights Commission, noted only 6%, approximately 16
That's right.
of the 260.
Yeah.
So this is it. So in the coming weeks or so, we'll be fact-checking all of that. We all know that and see.
And of course, being an election year, the opposition will want to fact-check big time. And so, of course, this would be the opportunity to kind of pick holes in what the president has said when the debate happens at the National Assembly.
Absolutely, but again, one cannot forget, really, they've recorded, registered some notable, as it were, advancements, improvements in certain areas.
Sure.
Nobody doubts that. In
Quite.
fact, these days in the office, all that we talk about is that, what's going on with the electricity? It is just so regular. We can't remember the last time we had this stretch of electricity supply, as it were, with that. And people are talking about the roads as well, infrastructure. So, yes, one must notice that and acknowledge. But again, it doesn't end there. Let's save the lap of honor until later.
Until later. But thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And just anybody, if you're watching the show for the first time, there are some stories that demand more of our time than others. And you'll get to know that as we go through this program. And if you regular watcher, you don't need me to tell you that. Okay, but thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Story number 2, again, we stay with the president. And they launched a new ferry, a kind of green, kind of, environmentally friendly ferry called the Barra. And yes, it'll be Banjul to Barra. But some people are making some rather grand claims for what this means. Not just for those who commute, but for the Gambia. You don't believe me? Have a look. Have a listen.
The ferry is delivered through collaboration between the Ministry of Transport and the Gambia Post Authority with the support of a $20.6 million grant from the African Development Bank under the Banjul Port Expansion Project. It marks a significant step in modernizing the country's ferry services. Designed with fuel-efficient engines and lower emissions, officials say the new Barra ferry reinforces Gambia's commitment to environmentally friendly transport. Built by Damin Shipyard in the Netherlands, the ferry has the capacity to carry up to 800 seated passengers alongside trucks or about 2,000 passengers without heavy trucks. It is also equipped with an advanced radar system supported by sophisticated cameras, firefighting systems, and 2,000 life jackets.
My government has prioritized the continuous development of transport infrastructure under the National Development Plan, IRUA. Investment in this sector is central to our ambition of positioning the Gambia as a hub for sub-regional trade, value addition, distribution, and re-export activities.
Mr. Mboj, I said some rather grand claims, not just by His Excellency the President, but others, particularly supporters of his, were talking about this transitioning and positioning us as a kind of regional hub. I didn't get it. I mean, with all due respect, this is Banjul to Barra ferry we're talking about. It's not going along the coast of West Africa or up the river. So I didn't get that at all. But nonetheless, these grand claims were made. But to the practical side of it, without vehicles, 2,000 passengers, with vehicles, 800, it would definitely ease congestion. And we've seen what the congestion can be like on that particular crossing, Mr. Mboj.
Or maybe he meant that this was really part of a sort of architecture, as it were, including the Sanyan seaports and that sort of thing.
Sure. And he also promised to build a bridge across.
Absolutely. I've written here, so the bridge is on the back burner for now.
Yes, he did mention it
so
at the day. Yes, quite.
Oh, absolutely. When you look at this ferry, apparently they use hybrid technology, combination of diesel fuels and sort of solar-powered batteries. So all these systems.
Hybrid, as it were.
Exactly. And the safety upgrades, as it were, separating where the trucks will be, where human beings will be. And there, as our reporter said, the advanced radar system, you know, firefighting equipment, 2,000 life jackets. All of that, isn't it? Fantastic. Just as you said there, it will ease congestion, waiting time, you know, and the like. Yes, but just as I think one of the speakers said, now how do we manage it?
How do we manage it?
Competent management of institutions and resources.
Something we don't have a great record in.
We don't have a great record in competent management. So that will be really, for the long-term impact, will ultimately depend on the
That's right, because when the question was raised, I think they thought they meant just the mechanics of it. And they were saying, oh, we sent people abroad to train in how to kind of fix it if it's broken. But I don't think that's what people were necessarily meaning when they said about the management of it. It was about, you know, doing it and using it efficiently and effectively so that, you know, we profit from it, you know, as a grant, 20.6 million grant. So, you know, it's not a loan. But yeah, it's something significant. And of course, as we were saying, you and I and many other people, we don't have a great record in kind of managing these kind of big things, either managing them efficiently, effectively, or in terms of maintenance. And that's the big challenge, really.
And have you seen a pattern, Adi, all the time when we talk about how do we manage this or monitor that? They will tell us that we've sent people for training. The mechanics of it, they seem to think that with management, that's really what matters. when we know that that's not true. The mechanics of it, that's one thing. The ethics of management, as it were, even the virtuosity, you know what I mean? The right policy, working, giving you the right outcomes that you want. It's not automatic at all. Most of management is about judgment, imaginative judgment. Well, there's no paper that's going to give you that. You know what I mean? So it takes a lot more. No wonder that we are failing at it, because maybe we underestimate what management means, as it were. And that's the heart of any organization. We are part of a massive organization. I know how constantly it is drumming in our heads. Admin and HR management is at the very heart of whether an organization will fail or succeed. So that is really what our problem is. We think there's just mechanics instead of, you know, you've got other aspects as well, obviously.
It's much more than that. But thank you for that monitoring. I did ask that if they're talking about 2000 and when we had an official here, I said, well, suppose it's ferry's full and there's 2001 person and he happens to be the brother of somebody. Are you going to turn him away? Because we tend not to do those things. We always think, oh, one more is not going to matter. But, you know,
one will lead to two, two will lead to three, and before you realize it, this is it. Our social networks, as it were, really impacting negatively on how we run our institutions, doing favor for this, favor for that. It's just an extraordinary situation.
It really is. But, thank you for that. So we will watch this one with a keen eye. Thank you for that. Third one, and we stay with the First family, because the First Lady went to the United States of America at the invite of the US's First Lady, who held this conference and a summit, kind of mini summit for other First Ladies and other dignitaries. And it was quite an interesting one. I watched it. And there was, she walked in, Melania Trump, accompanied by a robot, and that seemed to grab the headlines around the rest of the world. But for us, we were listening to what our own First Lady had to say, and here is some of what she had to say.
Today, we address an issue that will define our future, the well-being of our children in a rapidly evolving digital world. Technology is transforming how children learn and connect. For countries like the Gambia, this presents both opportunity and responsibilities. Opportunity to expand access to education and responsibility to ensure digital spaces are safe, inclusive, and empowering.
She also emphasized the importance of digital literacy, noting ongoing efforts to integrate technology into classrooms and empower young people, especially girls, through STEM education. The First Lady concluded by stressing that no country can tackle these challenges alone, calling for sustained global partnership to ensure children everywhere can thrive in an increasing digital world.
In an increasingly digital world, we're all, when we mention this younger generation, we've suddenly become Americans, and we don't talk about Generation Z, we talk about Gen Z, Z for Z. And they seem to be, some of the people we're talking about, being kind of digitally literate. But as First Lady says, there are also safeguards that we need to build in. As you and I were about to come to the studio, Mr. Mboj, I read Keir Starmer's proposal about banning, sort of access to young people. And these are some of the things that need to be built in, because we see how easy it is and how pervasive these digital things have become in our lives.
Haven't they done something similar in Australia?
Australia
like
lead
that.
the way.
So you see the debate over there. They're very scared, as it were, fearful of the algorithm.
Yeah, quite.
How it encourages sort of bad behavior and the like. You realize that we are not focused on that.
No, quite.
You realize the way we talk about it, those dangers are there, but it seems for us the positive aspects, how it will help us get out, as it were, of this sort of underdevelopment and the like, how the digital revolution must be part of, what's going to kick us forward, as it were, very much part of it, so the positive aspects. So today to talk about digital age is a cliche now.
Yeah, quite.
You know what I mean? So Gen Z, oh yes, digitally savvy and all the rest of it. But what are they like politically? The two are linked. The two are linked really, in the end, in many ways. That area, we don't go much into it. And here, the irony of it. It is the U.S., Melania Trump's husband, who is really dismembering, dismantling any the cooperative, the collaborative ideas. Sure. The sacred cow. Used to be the sacred cow. This thing, collaboration, cooperation. The whole world. He's the one dismembering it. That's right. So the irony of it, our First Lady there talking about collaboration in a country now that doesn't
want to collaborate with anybody or anything. And what was interesting for me, as I said, I watched the whole 2 hour plus or whatever, and various First Ladies spoke, including Fatima Bio from Sierra Leone. But the thing that surprised me was that there had been a landmark case just days before in the US where a mother sued Meta, Facebook, for addiction of her daughter to and won against, at $3 million or so dollars they awarded her. And they thought, wow, this is something. And because that was it we know how addicted they are, because we look around and we just see, it's not even scientific, I know, but you just walk along the street and you see people who they're not even paying attention to anything. They're just hooked on their phones. They can't put their phones down for 1 second. So the addiction is real. And yet it wasn't really addressed in all the talks about people talk about safeguard and so on. They talked about, dangers of, children being influenced and groomed and so on. But the addiction to the algorithms that they use to keep you coming back, that wasn't really addressed, which surprised me somewhat.
Absolutely, because with us generally we tend to address cyber when it comes to the dangers of social media, cyber crime, misinformation. We're really not focusing on psychologically what these things are doing to our children. Whereas over there they are doing that. But again, the technology emerged from that society. So their understanding of it would be different from ours. So we are still, I still call it naive. Perhaps that naive phase, or this is a wonderful thing, or our kids are so smart nowadays, so intelligent. Oh my God, when you listen to parents, when we talk about our children, it's unbelievable. But the dangers lurking in there, we really do not know. Kids just lock themselves up. They don't even have social skills anymore in a conversation, as it were.
They only interact using their phones.
Absolutely. And even when it comes to knowledge, they've got fragments of it because of the nature of it. I once, in England, I was given a ride by a Chinese person. He said to me, because I had lots of books, he said to me, you kids, your problem, you think that information is knowledge. Not quite the same. So there are all sorts of things that we should be discussing, really. We are not. I hope we wouldn't be surprised in the future.
We hope not. Thank you. I think we've spent quite a lot on these stories already. So story number 4. Vice President Mohamed B.S. Jallow is in Cameroon as I speak at attending a World Trade Organization summit, kind of mini summit. Actually not mini, there's people from 30 or 40 countries there, so it's more than mini. But he took time to meet members of the Gambian community in Cameroon. Yes, you know, you and I know that even if I went to Outer Mongolia, I'll find Gambians there. And this is some of what they had to say to him.
The meeting provided a platform for open dialogue as they expressed appreciation for the opportunity to engage directly with government representatives. Several community members, including Lamin Jaite and Buba Keita, raised pressing concerns affecting Gambians residing in Cameroon. They called for urgent government intervention to improve access to essential national documentation, particularly identity cards and passports. Furthermore, they also appealed for assistance in facilitating the repatriation of Gambian nationals stranded in Cameroon, noting that many of those affected are women who had relocated to the country with spouses who have since passed away. Other speakers also urged the government to consider appointing a consular representative, citing recurring challenges with law enforcement authorities, especially in cases involving expired national documents.
We are very happy to receive our Vice President to this country in Cameroon. And second, we are the community who are here wanted to go to return to the Gambia, but they don't have means. And then we are demanding the government if they can do something on behalf of Gambian citizens and Gambian government.
In response, Vice President Jallow assured attendees that their concerns would be formally communicated to the relevant authorities for prompt consideration.
We also sympathize with the families. We'll still discuss with authorities, with both immigration and the Minister of Gender, you know, and to see how we can support them. But at the same time, we'll extend it to His Excellency the President to see what we can do, you know, and other philanthropists.
They'll speak to the president and other philanthropists. And one of the reasons I brought that is that when the story came up, a lot of people in the office were surprised, actually, that, oh, there are Gambians there who are trying to get back. And as we said, some of them, their spouses passed away and they'd like to return home. They're not able to do so. But the thing that surprised me was that we don't seem to have any kind of consular representation there. I don't know, did that surprise you?
Oh yes, it did. Certainly, I've got that underlined. I was surprised that there was a consular representation there. Absolutely. So we'll see what will happen there. So here, what happened? Well, our Vice President went to this WTO meeting. Yeah. So it was a good thing that he had an audience, as it were, with the community there. So this is it. We'll talk to the president and see the philanthropy that will address the stranded people there. I understand that mainly women, as you said,
that's right,
who had been spouses, but again, the husband passed away and that sort of thing. But the other bit is about institutional efficiency.
Quite.
ID cards,
well, that was the thing.
Stuff like that. And this is what we talk about all the time. I mean, some people will tell you, even in this country, sometimes when you lose an ID card to get it replaced. Oh my God. So that bureaucracy, very slow. What are we going to do about that? So that's a different point. So absolutely it was a good thing. And sometimes I even wonder, you know, in the sort of the separatist areas, north, south, north,
that's
west,
right. Anglophone, francophone.
That's it. How are we sort of, because perhaps people from Gambia speaking English, maybe you will want to go to the English-speaking part. I do not know how much, you know, how many Gambians are there, how are they affected, stuff like that. Sometimes we wonder.
Yeah, right. But as I said, a sort of kind of cute and interesting story, I thought, certainly. Thank you for that, Mr. Boyd. Story number 5. Also in Cameroon, at the same time, in Yaoundé, was our trade minister. And he made an appeal for people to come and see the Gambia as an investment destination. Have a look, have a listen.
Including ongoing effort to review and modernize the Investment and Export Promotion Act. These reforms are aimed at enhancing transparency, improving investor protection, and streamlining approval processes, and strengthening the mandate of the Gambia Investment and Export Promotion Agency. Our objective is to ensure that Our legal framework is aligned with international best practices and responsive to the needs of both domestic and foreign investors.
These sectors, he argued, present diverse and scalable opportunities for both regional and international investors seeking growth in emerging markets, positioning the Gambia as a promising hub for sustainable investment.
The Gambia has embarked on a deliberate and forward-looking reform agenda aimed at improving the investment climate and positioning the country as a competitive destination for sustainable investment. In this context, the IFDA comes at a timely moment. It provides a practical, transparent, and development-oriented framework that aligns closely with the reform priorities of LDCs.
Samboj, there we heard our Trade Minister making what my colleague Esonyasi called a strong case for people to come and invest in the Gambia. How strong is the case for investing? What are the sectors that people could kind of, come and invest? Particularly if, as we'll hear in another story, Gambians don't seem to be investing in their own. How do you convince people to come from outside to invest?
Well, he told us, didn't he? The untapped potential across sectors, agriculture, fisheries,
That's
tourism,
right. Yeah.
Manufacturing, services,
Yeah.
and all the rest of it. So we have certain comparative advantages. I think the peace,
it's a good one.
Good thing.
Yeah, sure.
And the democratic governance.
Yeah.
All of these things.
Those are things that attract investors, of course. Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
And the business environment, reasonably predictable, isn't it?
And
We
economy
understand that.
Fairly stable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are limitations, obviously.
Sure.
The low industrial capacity.
Yeah.
But again, it's an area, it's an opportunity.
Well, this is
where
it.
one can come and
Exactly.
invest. Yeah. And there are certain infrastructure gaps and the rest. Sure. But yes, so there's another index. How easy to do business.
That's right, ease of doing business index.
Ease of doing business index.
How well do we score on that?
These things matter. And earlier on we were talking about institutionally we were very good at managing things. Sure. So these are the things, the factors that investors would take into account, obviously, because you don't want excessive bureaucracy. It's just so annoying.
Yeah,
you don't want stuff like that. But yes, that was a good pitch. For them to come to the Gambia. Yeah. And I understand that we've got this sort of Gambia Investment and Export Promotion Agency Amendment Bill 2026. That will also create the legal framework, the legal framework for stuff. So, yeah, definitely potential, but whether you can actualize it, well, it depends on how you manage it, isn't it?
That word again, how you manage it.
Absolutely. We cannot move away from that because we know, we've had enough experience.
Indeed. Well, thank you for that. And that will take us to a break. And after the break, we'll have 5 more cracking stories. So do not go away. Join us after this break. Hello and welcome, and if you're just joining us, welcome, and if you were with us for the first half, welcome back. You're watching the Week in Review. I'm Arid Arami. Across the table from me I have Mamadou Mboj, and we've had 5 really good stories, but of course, as you know, 5 really good ones still to go, including this next one. People always say, ECOWAS, what do they do? Well, actually, recently they've been going around the country looking at and appraising some of the projects that ECOWAS have funded here in the Gambia. Don't believe me? Have a look, have a listen to this video.
They noted that the new facilities have mitigated smoke-related health issues and created safer, more efficient work environments.
This smoking house is very important for the beneficiaries because first time they don't have enough smoke house. The smoke house they have is not healthy for them. But right now, all the women are very happy about it.
1977.
I have been working here since the birth of my first child. Since then, I have dedicated myself to this work.
By the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development aims to foster peace, resilience and economic vitality in fragile communities throughout West Africa.
Mr. Mboj, as if I knew what we'd been discussing, they're now tasked with managing these things responsibly for their sustainability. And we heard there, and the reason I chose this is because really, genuinely, we've had this discussion in the office, Ecowas, what they're all about, because it's always about the big kind of political stuff that they haven't been able to solve. You know, we have, you know, we kind of become Africa's coup d'etat central and so on, and all these other big things about, you know, crossing borders. And yet there are funds like this that are actually making a difference and making an impact.
That's it, and I think it is in that area that Ecowas can make a difference. Sure. Because really, politically, it doesn't have the teeth. Sovereign nations, the Gambia included, of course, we do not want to hand over anything at all to this body. But without that, it really cannot function as it should. So yes, it does stuff like this. The Ecowas Fund for Regional Stabilization and Development certainly needs that, especially in the light of what's been happening recently with the certain breakaway from Ecowas. And we know that you need to stabilize countries and develop so that you would encourage, as it were, to stave off as much as you can the kind of behavior soldiers taking over and the like. So yes, the reason why we've come to this phase is supposedly because we did well in an earlier phase.
Well, that's right.
We had completed that. So you move on to a new phase. I think this was introduced since 2019.
That's right.
As a pilot program. So this is it. Apparently with this initiative, it will enhance, I understand, food security, productivity, and all the rest of it.
That's right.
Yes, just as our reporter said there in the end. Manage it well, and the likelihood of getting the right outcomes sort of are higher.
Yeah, well, yes. That M word again, management. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Story number 7. A voice familiar to us and possibly to you, the viewer. Chairman of the Q Group has been around to look at a particular project to do with rice growing, and he had some words to say to the public and to potential investors. Have a look and have a listen.
Everybody eats rice in the Gambia, and 70% minimum or 80% of the rice we eat is imported. So the government took a decision to, reverse that trend. As Consul General for South Korea, I engaged my ambassador and the South Korean government. We were fortunate to have a grant, 2 grants. One for seed banking and seed multiplication, and also capacity building. If we have to achieve this goal, for me, I think that the most important thing is to move to mechanization because of few important reasons. One is we don't have a lot of farmers now. You come to the villages, most of people in the village, the young people especially, have moved to the towns. Only the women, most of them age of 60 and above, go to the farm. So that means that, the manpower has reduced significantly. Secondly, also with the advent of technology, now people have moved to mechanized farming. I know that even here you have Mr. Dabo and others, a lot of private sector have started going into, rice production. And I think it's a very lucrative business, and I'm calling on all private sector to see, there is enough farmland in the country. I think that survey was done and established. So now it's just for private sector participation. So I'm calling on all the private sector. This goal of the government can only be achieved if private sector participation is in the forefront. For me, that's my conviction.
Conviction there of Chairman, Mr. Mboj. And I have to say that watching that and having kind of done the history and so on over the years of, Jahali Pacha and all these, and the kind of yield that it had in 1969, and it always surprised me that in a country where, as he said, everybody eats rice, more business people have not seen this as something to go into. If everybody eats rice, then you captive audience, and yet 2026 we're making this appeal and we're bringing in experts and so on to come and just kind of show us how to do something that we've been doing quite well some years ago.
Absolutely. This is why some experts do say that development is not linear.
Indeed.
So we
you don't go, quite.
It doesn't
follow.
Sometimes you have to take a few steps back in order to come back forward, to surge forward. So this is really what we are experiencing, because by then we produce more rice than today. Everybody knows that.
Quite.
So this is it. We are sort of now on a journey, as it were, to rediscover, as it were, and even surpass, as it were, surpass it. So, and it is true, you need lots of private sector operators, as it were, to make it work. So now it is up to the government. How do you create the right incentive?
The enabling environment.
The enabling environment is really about the right incentive, you know, for people to come and invest in this area. But because it is really so untapped, look at it today. Agriculture contributes 25% to GDP. Come on, you want agriculture to provide 30-40%, as it were, stuff like that. So yes, the space is there, as it were. How much are we going to harness, as it were, this opportunity?
These are the big questions. Thank you for that. And of course, you mentioned their mechanization, because 30 or 40 years ago, people thought this was a kind of labor-intensive thing, and so we don't want to bring in mechanization because you then have lots of people unemployed. What do you do with those people? But now, as he says, urban drift, rural-urban drift, has created a situation where actually now you do need to bring in mechanization.
Mechanization, research, innovation, training your farmers. So it's got all these key planks in there, and that's how it should be. So you need all the operators to join in and see, you know, what one can do in the next 10, 15 years.
Fingers crossed, we'll be food and rice self-sufficient. Although if they depended on me, they'd all starve. I'm not a big rice eater. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Mbod. Story number 8. We keep talking about this being an election year, and it's significant because, you know, we're gearing up 5th of December presidential election. And so even in the midst of Eid, it tended to kind of dominate people's thoughts about, oh, you know, down the line, later in this year, we're going to have a big election. And so our colleague Osman Jatta engaged some people as they came out of prayers on Eid al-Fitr, and here is some of what they had to say.
Elections should not lead us into violence or set this country on fire. The Gambia is too small to accommodate conflict. Peace is priceless. We see countries facing crisis where people cannot even observe prayers. Let us protect and guard our nation. Politics is not worth fighting over. Let us engage peacefully, and whoever wins, we support them until the next cycle. Campaigns should be about ideas, not insults. When you see insults, people lose respect for you.
Samboj, campaign should be about ideas, not insults. We know that. But nonetheless, political opposition is a kind of contentious thing. And sometimes it can spill over from rhetoric into real violence. But thankfully, we've never had that in the Gambia. And this is why we keep hearing people say, let's keep it that way.
Healthy politics, really. The conflicts, the differences are merely one of policy. Never personal, really. So that's the maturity one needs, really, to do liberal democracy where the society needs to mature, as it were. And we used to have that. How many times have I said it before? Back in 1987, elections in this Gambia was the parliamentary elections. The PPP candidate in Bakau, somebody called Sam Silla, and that was Dembo by Force, the person they called Dembo by Force. I wore Sam Silla's t-shirt, you know, with this image on it. I went into that household. Nobody cursed me. Nobody did anything to me. So we were far more tolerant. If I were to do something like that today, they'd be like, oh, you were provoking. You see the cultural difference, the milieu.
These days, even if you wore a particular color,
that's it.
People will say,
that's it.
You know.
To my mind, we've regressed. You see, the heart of really liberal democracy is about tolerance. Not that the other party or the people wouldn't say hurtful things. Where does that exist? That is why tolerance is really the heart of it. Luckily for us, in our history, we've got really nothing violent. You know, relative to other countries around us. We've never really had that. So sometimes when I listen to certain people say, oh, let's talk about peace and all of that, I'm saying, let's be careful. I don't want to be complacent. I don't want to sound complacent. But again, let's not talk ourselves into trouble. As if there's a massive, deep-seated problem that we need to deal with. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
You know, it doesn't exist.
And as you said, no room for complacency. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Mboch. Story number 9, our penultimate story. We go abroad, but nonetheless it's one that kind of embraces and encompasses the Gambia. What's that about? Well, the UN, they had a interesting summit where it ended with a declaration that enslavement of Africans was the gravest crime against humanity. But as I said at the top of the program, not everybody was pleased about that. Have a look, have a listen.
The resolution was adopted with 123 votes in favor, while the United States, Israel, and Argentina opposed it. 52 countries, including the United Kingdom and members of the European Union, abstained. The resolution calls on member states to consider formal apologies and contribute to a reparations fund, though it does not specify financial commitments. While General Assembly resolutions are not legally binding, they carry significant moral and political weight on the global stage. The resolution also points to the lasting effects of slavery, including systemic racism and economic disparities affecting people of African descent worldwide. Backed by the African Union and the Caribbean Community.
So US, Israel, and Argentina, the three that voted against. United Kingdom abstained, and that became a huge talking point in the United Kingdom, particularly from the conservative Kemi Badenoch, the conservative leader, whose origins are Nigerian, and she doesn't want to be called Nigerian, so I won't call her Nigerian, I'll say her origins are Nigerian. And she's been the most high profile who's come and said, I wouldn't have abstained, I would have voted against. She would have been in the camp with US, Israel, and Argentina. Argentina, no surprise, because this was a kind of home for Nazis after the Second World War. They felt comfortable there. And for those who watch football, Argentina used to have a population of enslaved people, but have you ever seen a black footballer represent Argentina? Never. I've been watching football for 60 odd years. So no surprise there. Israel, again, no surprise. They kind of had cornered the market. And so, but a question somebody asked me literally just before we came on a WhatsApp group, we said, was this legal, moral, and what the other word? He used 3 phrases. What was it exactly, or symbolic? And that was it. And I'll pose that to you, Mr. Mboch.
It is certainly not legal, because I don't think it is binding.
It's not binding. It's not binding.
Was it a moral statement? Possibly so. But what I hear, what I've read experts saying, that this could open the doors for reparations and acknowledgements and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Well, Argentina, between 1580 and 1640, 2/3 of their imports, as it were slaves. So one understands that, because of when we go for reparations.
Yeah, quite.
Absolutely.
Quite.
The UK and the rest of the European Union.
Yeah, quite.
What, 52 countries?
Yeah, quite.
Abstain.
Abstain, yeah. 52 countries, 52
countries.
Yeah,
52 countries abstain.
Abstain.
Stuff like that.
Right.
And even we heard from the people representative, observer, UN. What did he call this? Said it was a partial narrative. But then we go back, was it Pope Nicholas's edict, 1452 and 1455, approving enslavement of non-Christians in Africa by the Portuguese.
Well, this is it.
So you can see why some voted for it,
yeah, quite.
Others voted against it, and yet others abstained.
Quite.
Really, it's just what suits them.
Well, this is it. And then, of course, when we talk about reparations, of course, in the United Kingdom, the obscenity of reparations was that the owners who lost their slaves were paid for the fact that they'd lost their slaves. And yet neither the enslaved, including the ones in America who were promised 40 acres and a mule, they didn't get that. They're still waiting for that. You know, and yet people don't think that was an obscenity, and yet you hear these voices raised against it. And of course, you know, in the thing I circulated in our group, you know, Germany alone has paid $60 billion, pounds, I beg your pardon, to Jewish people who suffered under the Nazis and to the State of Israel since 1952. So it's not kind of even that long ago. That's just 3 years before I was born. So from then till now, they've paid that amount, which is kind of it's a trickle. And just let me say here, it says the UK in the 1830s, following the abolition of slavery, paid owners the equivalent of today's money, £16 billion. And as I said, for me, that's a bit of an upset. And I can actually, if anybody wants, I can send you the Hansard extract where this was debated.
Absolutely.
And so it's not kind of made up stuff. It's a fact, you know.
Capitalism works in a strange way.
It will indeed.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's always for the winner.
Well,
it's always on the side of the winner.
But
so this is it. This is a milestone, isn't it? We call it a landmark, the gravest crime against humanity, because you've got sort of like this competition, haven't you?
Well, this is it.
Was it the Shoah,
the
Holocaust, or
yeah.
whatever?
Yeah.
But
and you know, just on a personal note, I remember being in London, and you know, for a long time, you know, they used to tell us to have a kind of a moment's silence for the Jewish Holocaust. And then when I was working at the Department for Business one year, I opposed it. And I said, I'm an African. We had our own Holocaust. I don't hear anybody having a moment's silence. And they stopped it. So many people hated me for it. I didn't give a damn. But, you know, like you said, there's a competition, like, oh, who suffered the most. But, yeah, you know, 400 years of that, particularly the transatlantic and the trans-Saharan one as well.
We don't.
We tend not to mention that much.
One,
yeah.
really.
You know, and so yeah.
You know. And regarding Kemi, it is her right to do that.
Of course.
You see, I don't like this sort of politics of representation.
Like, oh, because she's black,
she should have this particular view.
Yeah.
I hated that. I always hated that. You cannot shoehorn all black people into this tight shoe, as it were. No, it's all right to be that.
Well,
you know, if I want to claim Nigeria, you know, I claim it. If I don't, I don't.
Yeah, quite. And she was very noisy about this particular one. But thank you for that, Mr. Mboj, about why she would have voted against it. And she thought it was kind of gesture politics, which I thought was an insult. But anyway, that's another matter. So that takes us to our final story. Speaking of Nigeria, somebody who's proud to be a Nigerian, of course, is the Nigeria president. And he was recently in the United Kingdom. And boy, what a lovely welcome he got. Have a look, have a listen. If India was said to be the jewel in the crown of the British Empire in Asia, arguably in West Africa, that title was held by Nigeria. That position was reflected in the way the red carpet was metaphorically and literally rolled out for President Tinubu's state visit. The president was accorded a rare royal welcome in London, where he was formally received and hosted by His Majesty King Charles III, underscoring the long-standing relationship between Nigeria and the United Kingdom. In a gesture that resonated deeply with Nigeria's cultural diversity, King Charles referenced proverbs from Yoruba, Hausa and Igbo traditions, drawing warm applause from the distinguished guests.
Ekabo Shadani.
The evening also coincided with the Muslim feast of Eid al-Fitr, marking the occasion particularly significant for President Tinubu, a Muslim. In a light-hearted and memorable moment, the king concluded his remarks with a toast delivered in Nigerian pidgin, delighting attendees and adding a personal touch to the historic evening.
So as I close, Mr. President, in anticipation of Eid al-Fitr in Nigeria and across the world, I can only wish you and the millions of Muslims in our countries Eid Mubarak. And in doing so, let me propose a toast to the President and people of Nigeria. Niger no day carry last.
Mr. Mboj, Niger no day carry last. Nigeria is not going to be left behind. And as I said in my report there, they rolled out the red carpet metaphorically and literally. Because there's a big, of course, Commonwealth heads of government, and they seem to be wanting both. He met Keir Starmer the day after this event, And again, he also spent some time with him. And they actually signed some deals, including, one have to say, deportation deals. But they want Nigeria to kind of assume this kind of role that is long threatened to assume, but never quite, although it's kind of imagined that it had this role. But really, it hasn't, particularly because of the fight against kind of jihadist sort of violence in our region.
Absolutely, and apparently the first Nigerian president to make a UK state visit in 37 years.
This is true.
And apparently only the second African to be received at Windsor Castle as well. I read that. That was interesting. Right. The last one was William Tubman apparently in 1962. So there were quite a few deals there. Indeed. 746 million pounds to refurbish Nigeria's trading port.
Yeah, quite.
And then Nigeria will also buy from British Steel, as it were. It's been going through some difficulties. So there are all sorts of ways in how they can collaborate, isn't it? And to imagine Nigeria descendant people, such cultural presence in Britain. We've lived there, every area. You've got people of Nigerian descent who are like making waves culturally. So, you know, when it comes to soft power, if I can call it that, Nigeria's soft power in Britain, well,
it's there.
It's there.
Yeah, quite. So. I think that's a lovely one to end on before the producer throws us out of the studio, Mr. Mboch. But thank you for that. And to you, the viewer, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Until we come your way again next week. Goodbye.